Hey everyone, this is Brandy. Welcome to Christ and Culture. I'm here to do another review, this time on a book I read called The Pilgrim's Progress, which is a really good book. It was written a long time ago, but I think it still has a lot of relevance to people today because it goes through a lot of the same struggles that people are currently going through. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about this book and about the author, and hopefully that, it'll persuade you to want to go and pick it up. So this story is about a hero who leaves his home and his family behind and sets off on a wild journey to find the ultimate treasure. Along the way, he meets several curious characters, finds himself in some crazy situations, and must somehow overcome these seemingly insurmountable circumstances. Sounds like the plot of a summer blockbuster, doesn't it? But this isn't the plot of a movie that has come out during any summer that you've ever lived through. This is the plot of a story that was written centuries ago, 1678 to be exact. That is the year that The Pilgrim's Progress was first published. Written by John Bunyan, The Pilgrim's Progress follows a man named Christian as he leaves his life behind and embarks on a journey to find the truth and reach the celestial city, which I understood to be heaven, and the truth is the gospel. So the book is fiction, but it's based on Bunyan's own internal personal conversion. Now, the version I read was a modern English version written by Alan Vermillier. I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name, but that version was published in May in 2020. The original text by Bunyan is available for free, but it can be kind of difficult to understand because it's written in a style that was customary in the 17th century. So kind of like an old Englishy vibe. I don't really know a whole bunch about like the different types of English and when they were prevalent. So if it's not really old English, forgive me. I don't really, I'm not really well versed in that, but it's different from what you and I as modern readers would, like what our eyes would be used to. So if you want a version that's a bit easier for modern readers to comprehend, such as Vermillier's, you'll probably have to pay for it, but it likely won't be that expensive. I bought my digital copy, the one by Vermillier, from Amazon, and it was only, it wasn't very expensive. So I actually only paid like $1 for it. So it wasn't that expensive, but it could be different now. I mean, that was a year ago when I bought it. I do know that it's part of Kindle Unlimited, which is a service where it's a subscription service, and you pay a certain amount. It's not that much, I don't think, for access to a bunch of different books every month for free. So it's not like the books are free. They're just kind of free for you to have while you're part of this membership. So back to the book. Before we get into Christian's story, let's take a look at Bunyan's story. He was born in November of 1628. Besides the Pilgrim's Progress, his other works include doctrinal and controversial writings, including a spiritual autobiography entitled Grace Abounding that he wrote in 1666, and another book called The Holy War, written in 1682. He died on August 31st, 1688, in London at the age of 59. Bunyan converted to Puritanism, so this was a major influence in most of his work. Calvinism was also reflected in his writings. Some of his books were written while he was serving prison sentences for holding church services that were not in line with what the Church of England believed and preached. He wrote Grace Abounding while he was imprisoned, and he might have also begun writing The Pilgrim's Progress when he was in prison as well. His typical style is allegory, which is a symbolic fictional narrative that conveys a meaning not explicitly set forth in a narrative. So it's kind of like a story, like in a kind of a metaphor format. So it may have a meaning on two or more levels that the reader can understand only through an interpretive process. So what you read on the page isn't necessarily something you should be taking at face value. You might have to think about it a little bit and think about what Bunyan is actually trying to convey with his writings. So Bunyan uses this format of storytelling to demonstrate concepts within evangelical theology by depicting it using characters. He uses powerful physical imagery, and according to Britannica.com, they described it as highly subjective prose style to express personal states of mind. The Pilgrim's Progress is the symbolic form of the story of Bunyan's own conversion and his own personal journey to Christ. So now that we have a little bit of background of Bunyan, let's get to an overview of what the Pilgrim's Progress is actually about. If you were going to guess the plot of the book just by the title alone, without knowing anything about the plot or its author in advance, you might think that the Pilgrim's Progress is a narrative about a pilgrim in some faraway land, which it is, but you probably wouldn't expect the story to play out like it does. To me, Pilgrim's Progress evokes the idea of a boring account of a day-to-day life in some kind of settlement, perhaps in the New World. But really, Bunyan's novel is actually meant to represent a spiritual pilgrim on a spiritual journey, and all of this is depicted as a real physical journey. In the version of the book that I read, the introduction is by Alan Vermillier, rather than Bunyan. But Bunyan does include an author's note in the original version of his book called The Author's Apology. And in it, he explains that when he began writing The Pilgrim's Progress, he didn't really intend to write an entire book. But as he kept writing, more ideas kept coming to him. And, when he was writing, obviously, he didn't set out to write something that would impress or please his neighbors. He wrote purely for his own satisfaction. Furthermore, the only reason he even started writing in the first place was because it provided a way to distract and occupy his mind so he wouldn't focus on worse things. So when he was done writing The Pilgrim's Progress, he showed it to several different people to gauge whether or not he should go forward with trying to have it published. Some said, do it, go for it, but others told him not to even bother. So he decided to brush off the naysayers and said that he would go ahead and try to publish it, and whatever happened. If it was successful and if it sold a lot of copies, then great. If not, then whatever. He didn't write it for anybody else anyway. He just wrote it for his own personal needs. So he also uses the author section to explain that even though The Pilgrim's Progress can be a little bit dark sometimes, it delivers the truth. And truth is the light that shines through the darkness. Darkness and uplift can both come from the same story. Your novel or your story that you're trying to tell doesn't have to be all one or the other. Truth is important because, among other things, it helps us make decisions and make our minds right. And it helps us understand, and it also tends to ease our troubles. Pilgrim's Progress is a parable, which is a metaphor that comes off as kind of a Christian folktale, but that doesn't mean that the message isn't important. Bunyan defends his use of parable by citing biblical examples, including Paul, and reminds us that many of Jesus' lessons were taught in such a way. So the fact that he addresses this in his author's note makes me think that some of the reasons that some of those people who suggested that he not publish was some of the criticisms were probably that it was too dark, and that would turn people off to the story. And also probably because he spoke in parable, which I can imagine that a criticism might be that it would be too difficult to understand. And also another criticism separate from that would be that it diminishes whatever message he was trying to get across, since parables are something that some people, even nowadays, would associate with children's books or children's stories. And I can imagine it was probably a similar situation back in the day when Bunyan was alive. So People probably thought that the fact that he used his method to tell his story diminished it in some way and made it not as serious or made the message not as important. But Bunyan is saying that no, that's not really true, because even the Bible and Jesus use the same method to get their points across and to share messages. So those criticisms were not valid in Bunyan's eyes, and I tend to agree. So it's an allegory, which is a metaphor. The Pilgrim's Progress does come off as, it kind of seems like a Christian folktale. And just because it is kind of folktale-y doesn't mean that the messages that are inside of it are any less valid or any less important. It can change your life if you pay attention to what's going on in the story and take its lessons to heart. And I've heard this too from other people that I've known. Actually, the person who I read this book with is part of a life group. So the life group leader, and one of the reasons she really liked this book is because it just spoke to her in such a strong way. And it was one of those books that she was one of those people whose lives got changed by it. So definitely don't write it off just because it seems simple or it seems like, something that a kid would read. So the characters of The Pilgrim's Progress, there's a lot of really interesting characters beyond just the main character. You meet a lot of characters throughout the story, but Christian is the main character, and because he's the vehicle through which readers experience the story. So he's the one going on the journey. You're going on the journey with him. And his goal, as I said earlier, is to leave the city of destruction and find his way to the celestial city, which, again, I understood to be heaven. The people that he meets along the way serve a myriad of purposes. Some of them are guides who help keep him on track and help him, guide him in the right direction. And some people are there to test him, to test his faith and to test how serious he is about trying to find his way to the celestial city. Some people are also on the path to the celestial city, and you'll see that they, try to take a different way, a different method of getting there, or, maybe some people do join him to, along with him on his trip, and they accompany him for a while. And some of those people, even some of the people who join him and accompany him on his journey, some of those people represent the pitfalls that Christians, especially many new Christians, may encounter. And then some of them are outright, opposition. It's not, just that they are mistaken or they are totally opposing Christian. But then, like I said, some of these people are good people, and they actually team up with Christian, and they have similar goals, and they do life together, which is, the whole point of a life group, kind of. That's the whole motto. You find somebody to do life with. So that was interesting that came up. That kind of shines through in these relationships that Christian has. So the plot: a man named Christian, he leaves his life behind and he embarks on this journey to find the celestial city. Again, heaven. And so the truth is he becomes a Christ follower. Basically, that's what this is. This is Bunyan's conversion story, and it's just told in an allegorical form. So Christian symbolizes Bunyan, and this journey is Bunyan's journey, spiritual journey on his way to Christianity and to learning about his faith and to finding his faith and following God's way. I would definitely read this book if you're a new Christian. It's a really good illustration of how just because you're a Christian, it doesn't mean that your life will be perfect from here on out. You're definitely gonna face some troubles, but even Jesus warned us about this, that you're going to find trouble because of him in some instances, but you can't let your circumstances dictate how you feel about life. You have to put your faith in God and believe that that his priority is what's best for us. Like, so we have to just trust that he knows what's best. And to do that, we should follow his path. So Christians, and that path you can find in the Bible, which is why it's really important to just be in your Bible and to study and to try to get to know God and figure out what that path is. So Christians who aren't new to the faith will also enjoy the book because it's a reminder to stay the course when things get rocky. The fact that you may have been in the faith for a while doesn't mean that we're perfect. It's a constant it's constant growth and constant change, and you're evolving constantly. The fact that you're not expected to be perfect. I mean, just because you've been a believer for a while, your faith can waver, and from what I understand, that's totally normal. It's not realistic to think that everyone's going to have the same level of faith like all the time, and that you're going to be super Christian like all the time. The point is that you lean into God when you feel your faith wavering, and that's how you build your faith. You get through these times where you have doubt, and when you come out on the other end and you still believe, that's something that can make your faith stronger. And when we feel our faith failing us, it's imperative that we turn to God and dive more into his word, because Satan's always looking for a foothold, and tough times are the perfect opportunity for him to worm his way into our lives. And to prevent that, we have to rededicate ourselves to Christ and cling to him in times of trouble, even if we might not feel like it. Faith is a lot of times not a feeling, it's a decision. So even when you don't feel like, when you don't feel like you're full of the Spirit, you have to make a decision to follow God and to stay the course. And I think that Pilgrim's Progress shows us this, because there's so many times when Christian could have turned back from his journey, but he doesn't. He pushes on, and it would have been easier to turn back and to go back to the city of destruction. But he knows that the path that he's on is the right one, and that his reward in the end, it's going to be worth it. So he perseveres, and he continues on through so many obstacles. In the Pilgrim's Progress, Christian's journey to the celestial city represents the journey a person takes when they come to Christ and decide that they want to live as a Christian. And this requires sometimes turning your back on your old life if it goes counter to what life as a Christ follower requires, or otherwise hinders you from following Christ's path. So if there's something in your life that is getting in the way, you have to let it go. If you have to decide what's more important, and then make your decision based on that. And in the story, this is what Christian does when he leaves his family and his old life behind. And yes, he leaves everything behind, including his family, his wife. He has kids, leaves all his friends, and he just picks up and decides to go on this journey, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what's out there in front of him. But he knows that he can't stay there. It's called the city of destruction for a reason. It's supposed to symbolize that his life that he's leading is not going to yield anything, that it can only yield destruction. So he, sees this, and he gets convicted by this, and he decides that even if it means leaving behind his family, that he needs to go. Just as in real life, Christian symbolic journey is fraught with temptations, distractions, deceptions, and a host of other obstacles. So that those are meant to take him off his path. But Christian remains focused on his goal of reaching the celestial city. And as Christians, this is what we have to do too. As soon as a lot of people say that when they become a Christ follower and they try to follow the path, that's when they get hit with most temptations. That's when the struggle becomes real. And it tests them. They test them to see if they're really serious about their journey, and they have to decide whether they want to power through and push through and stay the course, or if they're going to turn back. Christian, like I said, he has these obstacles as well, and he has to decide if he's going to keep trying to make it to the celestial city. He also had some help along the way from other pilgrims, which symbolizes that it's okay to get help from others in life. That's one of the reasons we have life groups as well. It's to help people get through difficult times and to help people stay encouraged, and accountability as well. So Christian's help that he gets from the other pilgrims is meant to symbolize that we aren't meant to go through life alone. We're supposed to fellowship, and we're supposed to do life with others. Some key themes in Pilgrim's Progress that I took away, and I mentioned both of these earlier, but it's worth it to reiterate. One of them is that someone who's looking for salvation has to be prepared to leave everything behind to follow God. And that's what Christian does. He leaves his entire life behind, including his family. And it wasn't easy, especially because he had to leave what was familiar so that he could start out alone on a path that was completely unfamiliar to him. And he didn't know what was going to happen, but he had that faith that, something was going to work out on the other end and that it was worth it. And it was scary for him to do that, but it had to be done. And he thought it was worth it. So out he went. Then another theme that I thought that really stood out to me was that walking the path towards the celestial city and remaining on that path is a constant struggle. So once Christian starts out on his path, he learns that it will not be an easy journey. Some people believe that once you become a Christian, life will be perfect and you'll never have any more problems. But like we were talking about earlier, the reality is that Christ followers will still have troubles after deciding to follow Jesus. Jesus even himself said that his followers will face troubles because of him. But the flip side of that is that Jesus is going to give us the strength that we need to get through these tough times, and that we have to lean on him when our faith falters. And it's a decision, like I said earlier, you have to trust that, you have to trust your faith. So I would definitely recommend the Pilgrim's Progress to all Christians. I thought it was a good book. I wasn't expecting it to be bad, but I wasn't expecting to find it as interesting as I did. One reason I was able to get into it the way that I was because many of the simple attitudes and behaviors that people displayed in the book were similar or the same as what people exhibit today. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be a surprise because, humans are humans no matter what decade or century you're in, but it was to me because I always imagine people from the past as being more conservative than modern people. I don't know why. I don't know, but that's just me. That's how I always do. Like, that's how I always think of, people from the past. Even though, like, intellectually, I know that wasn't the case at all. But I guess those moments and those instances where I am confronted with, proof that people weren't as super pure back in the day. I guess when I come upon those instances, I just kind of think that they were aberrations when they're just regular people, and that's, those actions and attitudes probably weren't as isolated as I believed them to be. So when I came across those attitudes and some of those actions and stuff in the Pilgrim's Progress, it just came as a surprise to me, even though intellectually I should know that it shouldn't have been a surprise. The Pilgrim's Progress was written in the 17th century, and it features characters who are dealing with the same moral and ethical issues that we're still dealing with in the 21st century. And I think that's why it kept me interested. It's kind of timeless in that way, and And when I, realized that, it's like, okay, this isn't just some book from hundreds of years ago that I can't relate to. These issues are still relevant today, so I need to pay attention to what's going on in this book, and how Christian deals with some of the same moral and ethical dilemmas that he's faced with. So again, that's a little overview of The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. The version I read was an updated, like, modern English type translation by Alan Vermeulen. I got mine on Amazon from Kindle. You can find the original version by Bunyan for free on Kindle, but other places as well. Like I said, it's in the public domain, so you should be able to find it wherever you get your digital, your ebooks. If you want to get a version that is translated and updated, it won't be free, but it shouldn't break the bank. And I definitely recommend it. So if you have any comments, reach out, put them on Instagram on the post for this review, and see you guys later. Be blessed.